Alright, so we're back in Palworld, and this time we're testing the RTX 4070. The specs are exactly the same as the previous video. It's a 12700K CPU paired with a DDR4 4000 megatransfers per second, CL18 memory, running in Gear 1. I'll put up all the specs on the screen right now. So we'll be testing once again at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. So let's just go over the settings here quickly. At the moment, we're at 1080p. It says custom, but it's the Epic preset just with TAA and not TSR. The preset selects TSR by default, but now we actually do have access to DLSS, right? So with the Radeon GPUs, unfortunately, we don't have access to FSR, which is kind of unforgivable in a brand new game in 2024. But then again, this game is in early access, so maybe it'll come soon. Hopefully it does. Anyway, so let's get the benchmark right underway. So the RTX 4070 seems to perform slightly better than the RX 7800 XT in this title, at least. Well, at least in my short benchmark run here. You can see that in the top right, well, luckily it's gone now, but my pals aren't very happy. Anyway, so the 7800 XT had around 110 frames per second average here, and it's more or less the same, but so there was a big stutter there and another one there. But after a little while, the NVIDIA GPU does stop stuttering. I know that there's traversal stutters and shader compilation stutters, etc., and it'll make sense that it stutters as you enter new areas. It's not the most optimized game there is, but the stutters are definitely less frequent than on the Radeon GPU, and I do think we're getting a slightly higher frame rate here. It's as if this game does favor NVIDIA GPUs. And it might be apparent by the inclusion of DLSS and not FSR. So I'm not sorry. I'm not trying to cause any drama here whatsoever. I'm just saying it as it is. But in my personal opinion, that's not acceptable. You have to have multiple upscalers if you want to release a new game in 2024. Alright, so at 1080p on the Epic preset, we had an average of 125 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at a respectable 101, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 7, which is slightly lower than the 9 the Radeon GPU had. But from here on out, it does seem to stutter a little bit less, but you'll have to play a little bit for the game to normalize and for you to actually see that the stutters are a little bit less. Anyway, so I did make a mistake in my previous video. I selected the high preset at 1080p, and there's no difference whatsoever, because if you have a look here, if we go to Epic, the only difference is texture quality, and that only saves video memory. It does not have an effect on performance, maybe 1 or 2%, like depending on your GPU, but it does not have a performance impact on the 7800 XT or the 4070. So it will just be dropping this down to medium. Not that it's necessary. We're getting 120 plus frames per second on average, and then I will just select TAA here again. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's get right to it. And now we're getting a decent, very high refresh rate experience. This is actually not terrible. I'm getting almost 200 frames per second. As I said, I unfortunately did not test this exact same setting with the Radeon GPU, but it's around 10% slower from what I could see. So you'll get similar performance with the Radeon GPU with these settings. Not that it's the best 1080p GPU, because you do run the risk of it becoming CPU limited, because it's quite powerful, both of these GPUs, relatively speaking. And but over here we can see that our GPUs is sitting at 99%, so that's definitely not being bottlenecked by CPU. The temperature of the GPU is quite high. Unfortunately, this is an entry-level Palworld dual GPU. It does have some thermal issues. I wouldn't say issues. If I monitor the hotspot and the GPU clocks, everything stays within normal range. There's no throttling happening whatsoever, and we're in the middle of summer. It's very warm here. Regardless, a repaste definitely will resolve this issue. I've had it with a lot of these entry-level GPUs. The factory applied thermal paste it just doesn't seem to cut it. So I usually just repaste. The 4070 Ti is due for a repaste as well, but I'm talking nonsense here now. This is talk performance. We're sitting here with an average of 161 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 127, and our 0.1% lows have increased exponentially to 61 frames per second. That's what I'd like to see. All right, so that's it for 1080p. I'm not going to be testing TSR, which is temporal super resolution, or DLSS at 1080p. Like, you don't need it with this GPU. You get a very decent frame rate. There was just a stutter there, probably an autosave, I hope. Anyway, so let's move over to 1440p. Right, we're at 1440p on the Epic preset, and just enabling TAA, no DLSS here. Unfortunately, I have to restart the game for you to change the resolution, because it takes your desktop resolution. Those textures haven't loaded in at all, or unless they're supposed to look like that, I can't remember. Anyway, so let's just reset our numbers, and my guy is dying. Hold on 1 second. So this I actually want to show you. This is purely Ark's UI. It's actually quite funny. I literally almost died of hunger there. Anyway, so let's just reset our numbers, and once again, this GPU is faring slightly better than the RX 7800 XT. It was hovering around 60 to 70 frames per second. We're seeing 90. I mean, it's not a big difference, like maybe 10-15%. I'll link both the videos to each other in YouTube, so you can go back and forth between them. But it's definitely running better. It's not significantly better, but it is better. And it's quite strange, because I don't think this game supports any ray tracing. I haven't seen any ray tracing in the options, and if it does use Unreal Engine 5 Lumen, like that's software ray tracing. It does not affect hardware ray trace performance as much as normal hardware ray tracing does. But you can see we are getting a pretty decent frame rate here, at 85 frames per second average, and our 1% lows are sitting at 69 or 67, and 0.1% lows are sitting at 37, even though we had a pretty big stutter there. And just one thing to note is this game uses very little VRAM. We're sitting at 1440p on the Epic preset, and it uses 4.5 gigabytes of VRAM. So don't worry about running out of VRAM with any of these GPUs. All right, so I'm just going to enable DLSS on this preset, and then we'll move it down to the medium preset. So we'll use DLSS quality, and now you see that anti-aliasing gets disabled, because now we use DLSS's anti-aliasing, and it wants to restart for every single setting you make. You don't need to restart. I've tested it. There's no performance difference whatsoever. The grass does look a lot softer. Not that it was particularly sharp, but there's quite a few artifacting issues here with DLSS. Once again, this is an early access game. Probably these issues will be fixed, but it's definitely a lot softer, and I don't think you can adjust the sharpness. I might be wrong, but now we are getting pretty much the same performance as what we had, even slightly more than what we had at 1080p on the Epic preset. So this is pretty much where I'd be playing this if I had a 4070 paired with a 1440p monitor. Although I don't know, these artifacting issues, the flickering issues, might be annoying. It might be annoying to the point where I'd just revert back to native, because this is not ideal. Anyway, the performance is pretty good, but the visuals not as much. Getting an average of 134 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 115, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 61. So let's just drop this down to the medium preset. As I said, the high preset makes no difference in performance whatsoever, and I don't even know why the texture detail or the texture quality gets changed, because this game, now we're using 3.7 gigabytes of VRAM. So definitely not a VRAM heavy game this. Right, so we'll just be testing on the medium preset, and we'll disable DLSS here and just go with TAA. As in the previous video, TSR, it's a temporal super resolution, but there's no way for me to adjust the resolution scale, which is quite funny. So I'm not sure exactly what kind of resolution scale it actually applies, but let's just start our benchmark run here. Now you can see the image is a lot more stable. This is on the medium preset, and sure, the shadow is definitely flickering quite a bit there, but the grass itself is in a much better condition. Right, so and we are sitting once again at 120 frames per second, so pretty decent high refresh rate experience here. The Radeon GPU over years, I went over this crest here, dropped into the 90s, so this one stays over 110. So the performance is definitely better on the RTX 4070, which is quite strange because the RX 7800 XT is slightly faster in most games with the pure raster performance. The 4070 is once again faster when it comes to ray tracing, hardware ray tracing that is. So not entirely sure why the 4070 is doing so much better than the RX 7800 XT. I did use the latest driver in the RX 7800 XT video. I'll probably just test again with some previous drivers because I have seen some issues with the latest driver. The LOD in this game is not of the highest quality. You can just look at the tree there. There where my crosshair is. As you get closer, and as you get even more closer, it'll change again. So it's like multiple steps of LOD, if that makes sense. Anyway, so we had an average of 115 frames per second, pretty decent, and 1% laser sitting at 97 and 0.1% laser sitting at 51. I don't think we'll be using DLSS at this preset just because we had pretty bad results with DLSS at Epic. All right, so let's move over to 4K. Right, we're now at 4K and not sure what is that elephant going to be aggressive. Let's just use the Epic preset and TAA, no DLSS. And I think this is where the Radeon GPU, it had around between 30 and 40 frames per second. So not much lower than this at all, but okay, this game definitely looks pretty good at 4K. This is on a 4K monitor, so at a 27-inch, so now at native resolution, it's definitely a pretty interesting looking game. Like, sure, the art style might not be for everyone, but like there is still a lot of good detail about this game. Like the foliage is especially pretty good, but we're not really getting a very playable experience here. Not that you do need a very high refresh rate experience to play this game. It's a pretty slow survival crafting MMO type of game. I do play single player because I have no friends, but it's pretty fun. I enjoy it, and maybe you don't need a high refresh rate experience, right? Maybe you don't even need 60 frames per second, but my personal preference is 60 or above and a high refresh rate experience if possible, and definitely possible at 1440p, just not at 4K native anyway. All right, so our average is sitting at 46 and our 1% laser sitting at 35 and 0.1% laser sitting at 21. So definitely still much better than a 1080p. As I said earlier, it might just be shader compilation stutters or traversal stutters because after a while they do seem to normalize. Anyway, so let's enable DLSS here on the Epic preset and see what kind of performance gains we can get. Like, we'll just start off with DLSS quality. Wow, that's loud. DLSS quality, and let's see if we can hit 60 frames per second. I think we should. Okay, that's impressive. Almost doubling our frame rate here. DLSS quality gaining us like between 30 and 40 frames per second for a final output of between 70 and 80 frames per second. That's impressive. This is one of Unreal Engine 5's quirks, if I can call it like that. Upscaling seems to be very effective with Unreal Engine 5. Like, it's in this specific game, it's probably not necessary because the 4070 is not a 4K GPU. So if you do play it with a GPU more aimed at 4K, you probably don't need to have DLSS or any upscaling enabled. But like a lot of Unreal Engine 5 games do benefit a lot with upscaling, and this seems to be one of them. And this is actually not a bad experience. I'd probably lock it to 60 frames per second and play like this if I had an RTX 4070 paired with a 4K monitor. Not a bad experience at all. But once again, this is on the Epic preset. We are DLSS actually lowered our VRAM usage quite significantly, which is good to see. Some games you don't see that bigger difference in VRAM usage, even though the internal resolution is much lower. over here it does seem to make a bit of a difference. All right, but before that GPU explodes, it's sitting at 81 degrees now. Let's just drop this down to medium, and medium, and then we'll see what happens. All right, so we're at medium, and just disabling any upscaling here, and once again running TAA, and let's see what happens. We're not really getting 60 frames per second here, which is understandable, but I was expecting at least 60. Now I did see slightly higher gains going from epic to medium previously, well, at lower resolution, so perhaps the percentage is the same, but still not getting a locked 60, and now we're seeing quite a bit of stuttering going on here. We are running out of time. The sun is about to set, and then the performance does change. So I think we'll move on to the next setting. I'm just going to enable TSR, the same as what I did with the RX 7800 XT, and see how it goes. Right, but before we do that, this is me from the future. I just snuck in another setting here quickly. So I just want to test with the 4K medium preset, but with DLSS set to quality, and then we'll do TSR. I mean, this is now disabled, so we'll just use DLSS quality, and we can actually then see what kind of performance differences there are by using DLSS or TSR. And spoiler alert, DLSS gives you a much bigger performance increase than TSR does. I'm just going to do a very quick run here. We are, I mean, getting just above 80 frames per second here. So once again, a very decent performance bump. Maybe not as much as at the Epic preset. We've seen almost double our performance there, but this is definitely good. So getting just under 90 frames per second DLSS set to quality on the 4K medium preset. This is definitely a setting to consider. I know that the time of day has reset. I'm recording this after I've recorded the whole previous video. I just want to slip this in there to give you an idea what the performance is like, as I'm pretty sure some of you would be interested in DLSS, more DLSS settings at 4K anyway. All right, so just a very short run, an average of 89 frames per second. Our 1% lows are sitting at 75, and our 0.1% lows are sitting at 44. All right, back to the original video. All right, so now we're definitely on the medium preset here. Like the only thing it changes is the TSR, and now there will be some upscaling involved, and now you can see we went from below 60 frames per second to above 60 frames per second. And I'm not saying it will maintain 60 frames per second at all times, but it'll get close. And now you don't, I mean, you have to rely on upscaling, and you're on the medium preset. So in this case, maybe just use the Epic preset and play with DLSS set to quality. If you do have an NVIDIA GPU, it performed better, and it arguably looks better. Like TSR, in this specific game, I haven't really seen many issues. The TSR implementation is not terrible from what I can see, but I'm also not pixel peeping. Anyway, so let's just call it as it is. Average of 68 frames per second. Your 1% low sitting at 62, and our 0.1% low sitting at 30 after that. So let's just enable the very low preset, or the low preset, same as what we did with the 7800 XT, so we can compare performance, and then it's the end of this video. All right, so we're on the very low preset here. I just want to see what kind of frame rates we do get. Unfortunately, the game doesn't pause when you go into the menu, and we didn't gain much. So, like, still just above 60 frames per second, but now there's no AA, right? So, okay, now we're going to lot. It does take a little while for the settings to take effect for some reason. I saw it earlier as well. But I probably wouldn't play like this. I know you can't see much. I'm sorry about that. It is a little bit late, but there's a lot of popping. If you want to see what kind of popping we do get, then just watch the 7800 XT video. You'll see that there's a lot of popping with the very low preset here. All right, I actually think that's going to be the end of this short video. Not that extensive, just to give you an idea what the performance is like. It's a fun game. If you do like Ark Survival type games, then give it a shot. And that's the end of this video, so I can actually go play this game now. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and as always, we hope to see you in the next one.